how dangerous did your gang life get? Like,
It was very dangerous. It was very dangerous. I lived through arguably the most dangerous time in St. Louis history in terms of gang violence, and this was in the mid-90s. The 5th District of St. Louis was dubbed the Bloody Fifth. A lot of murders. There was a huge gang war between where I hung out and another set, and we weren't nothing but maybe 3 or 4 blocks apart. I can remember sitting on the porch and a guy pulling up right in front of us and letting off, and me having to dive in the gangway and basically, you know, just getting missed. So this was every day, daily. It was very dangerous. And, you know, people compare, they always say, well, it's real dangerous today. And I say, man, y'all need to go back and look at the stats. Just look at the stats of like between 92 and 94 of gang violence and how many murders there were just on that side of the city. And then it started to expand. So you got 2 main sets in St. Louis. I ain't talking about Bloods. This is Crip on Crip. So you got the 60s and the 6 Deuce, 2 of the biggest gang groups in St. Louis warring. And then you have offsets taking sides. So you might have College and Carter and Redbud being the main 2 sets with the real issue. But then you have other sets that start to latch on to College and Carter. And then you have other sets that start to latch on to Redbud and Adelaide, and then everybody just picks sides. And it was crazy.
how many homies you think you lost during that war, or just over the years, like as far as gangbanging?
Early on, I can remember 2 that really affected me. 2 of my real close friends were killed early on, probably at the age of, I would say, 17 and 18. But all together, man, like close, because I lost a lot of people who were gang members, but in terms of guys who I hung out with, that was like from my set back then, I don't know if I can even put a number on it.
Hello, my name is Ryan Givins, creator and host of That Look docuseries. Thank you for joining us. One day as a kid, I was at my elementary school playing basketball. The location of the basketball court was on a valley-like slope, so people that wanted to watch the game couldn't look at it from afar. This is where I first seen STL Silk. Draped in blue khakis, blue Chuck Taylors, blue rag in his pocket, with the matching blue hat, it was obvious that Silk was a proud member of the Crips. Later in life, my older brother and Silk will become close friends. This would allow me to form a family-like bond with Silk. Come to find out, Silk was also a barber, and he would begin to cut my hair. One day I went to the barbershop to get a haircut, and Silk was no longer there. Come to find out, Silk had been sent to jail for crimes that weren't quite made clear to me till 25 years later. On a recent visit to St. Louis, I caught up with Silk, and he agreed to tell me the full story of his life and the events that led him to prison. So here's my exclusive interview with St. Louis Silk.
Named Silk Spann, AKA Silk, from St. Louis, Missouri. First part of my life, I grew up in Northwoods, which is a suburb of St. Louis. Was raised primarily by my grandparents. Mom was off in prison. So basically I was a ward of the state. They didn't give it to my father for whatever reason, and that's how I ended up in living with my grandmom in Northwoods.
How was life growing up with your grandmother?
It was peaceful, you know. I was a happy kid. You know, I didn't get a lot of what I wanted, but I got much of what I needed. You know, my grandmom, she worked 18-hour days, so she was always at work. Grandfather was somewhat of an alcoholic, so he wasn't necessarily the parent figure, although he was there.
Not even a year into Silk's life, things had already begun happening that would shape Silk's future for the worse.
My mother and father got divorced when I was about 1 or 2 years old.
Did you ever figure out like the reason they did, or was just they was both in 2 different worlds?
From what I can recall, my mom was she was real fast. You know, back then, and fast, I mean, she was in the streets. And at this point, my dad wasn't. I think he was worked for the post office or something like that. So he was going to work every day. But my mom was in the street. So, you know, you have those two different types of people. They're not going to last too long, you know. So I think they just eventually split up because of differences in lifestyles.
What was your relationship with your father, and what was going on with that?
Yeah, I used to see my fathers on the weekends only, and it wasn't every weekend, you know, as far as I can remember. It was like maybe a weekend out of a month, and it wasn't necessarily with my father at that point. It would be my stepmom coming to pick me up with my other brothers and sisters, and then, you know, we would go out to Chuck E. Cheese or go out to eat, and then maybe spend some time at their home in the city. But I did see my father, but it wasn't necessarily him coming to get me. If I was to guess, one of the reasons that I wasn't picked up as often is because of a history between him and my grandparents and my mom. So, you know, it was grown folks stuff that was going on. And as you know, children always suffer as a result of stuff that grown folks got going on in their lives. So, but our relationship, me and my dad, it was good.
Silk's mother died while he was in prison, but oddly enough, some of their most memorable moments happened in prisons. What was your mother charged you with, and what was that situation?
My mama had a variety of charges. It was small stuff, you know, like writing bad checks, stealing, stuff like that. You know, nothing huge. So she didn't never do like big sentences, but she did a lot of small sentences, like 4 years here, 3 years here, you know, stuff like that. But it was throughout my entire life.
Did you and your mother ever get to actually bond? Did you ever build a relationship with her once you got older?
The weird thing is we actually bonded a lot, but it was in prison visiting rooms. I was always, seemingly my whole childhood, I was always in somebody's visiting room talking to my mom. And once I was in the visiting room with my mom, she was hugging on me, rubbing my head, just like a mom would. But it wasn't outside of jail. It was just kind of different for me. But we bonded as much as we could, you know, under those circumstances.
Was any part of it traumatic as a kid, like walking through the jail? Like, how did you feel? Like, was it a big prison? Was it like, did anything stick out?
You know, this is something else that's weird, man. I never felt, you use the word traumatic. When we would go see my mom, we would walk through this area where it was actually the yard. So you would see other prisoners, but they would be on the other side of the gate. Now, mind you, this is a women's prison. So, you know, as a kid, they'll just run up to the fence, and everyone loved my mom. So they say, hey, that's Silky, and they all knew me by first name, and they would come up and, you know, reach through the fence, and it wasn't as strict as you would view prisons today, you know. So it wasn't never traumatic for me, you know. It was just a day in the life of going to see my mom. It was just normal for me because that's all I remembered. I didn't have anything to compare it to, if that makes sense.
How did you feel the older you got, not having your mother and father? Was there any point as a teenager that you was like, damn, I wish I had my mom and I wish I had my pops? Like, was it any point you felt like that?
Yeah, early on, maybe around the age of 13, probably earlier than that, maybe around 11 or 12. You know, you got other friends and they got their mom and pops in their life. So I had friends who lived on my street where we would, you know, they would ask if they had any friends that would want to go with them to wherever they were going, Six Flags, and I would always go. And when I would go, I would always have to ask my grandmama for money, or I would just be a tag along. And so when you go with kids who have both their parents in the household, you start to reflect on your own situation. And I started to resent a lot of the time that I missed with my mom, a lot of the time that I missed with my dad, and that's where my problem started.
And that built up resentment pushed Silk right into the streets.
Yeah, Northwoods was a suburban neighborhood, very quiet, green lawns, middle class. All the kids were at the bus stop in the morning. All the kids went to school. Nobody on the corner selling drugs. It was nice, very nice in Northwoods back then. I come up in Northwoods, but there was a neighborhood called Pine Line that was like 1 block away. Early on, I didn't necessarily notice any difference because we would always go over to a lot of my best friends lived in Pine Line. But as I got older, I started to notice a slight difference. It was a little rougher, not rough, but it was just a little rougher than what I was used to. And I was attracted to that. It was a little bit more exciting. Kids seemed like they was hanging out a little bit longer, so as a, curious child, of course, me looking for some sort of not have, when kids don't have a family life or they don't have family who are solid, they start to look for that outside of the home. And some of my first interactions with my outside family would come as a result of me hanging out in Pine Line.
You was in Northwoods, but you hung out with all Pine Line dudes at the time, right? But you never claimed Pine Line, like you never claimed a set while you was over, like.
Right. And because there's something in the middle of that. There was Northwoods and there was Pine Line, but then there was College and Carter. That's where my influence came from. And between Northwoods and Pine Line, of course, I was hanging out in the city. I had family in the city. So I was hanging out in the city outside of the suburbs. And I would bring that influence that I was receiving on College and Carter back to Pine Line. So I never claimed anything from Pine Line because that's not where I was necessarily influenced from the gang culture. My gang culture influence came from the city. And that's what I claim.
Even though Silk was heavily influenced by the gang activity in his family's neighborhood, something else would take first priority.
I remember the first time that I sold crack. Maybe it was a rock. It was new, so of course it was scary. I think when you're young, you want to front like everything is natural and everything is normal. But for me, that first time, it was scary because it's like, not because it was necessarily illegal, but it's just a whole new ball game. And you didn't want to get, you ain't want to be looked at as lame, get taken advantage of. Before that, I heard of dudes getting fake $20 bills and people running off with their dope and stuff like that. I didn't get fronted no dope. I never was the type to take, because I don't like owing people. So if anything, I saved up and bought maybe my first 50 or something like that. I never was the type of person to let somebody front me dope. First of all, I wasn't good at it. I didn't know if I was gonna fail or not, and I didn't want nobody searching for me because I owed them money. So, and that's probably one of the reasons I never really got heavy in the game, because I just decided to do my own thing.
So what did you do? Did you did you know somebody that was selling dope?
I was on a crack set. I was in the city, College and Carter, big dope set. And back then, it's way different than it is now. Back then, dudes was hanging on the corner selling crack, dope, it was popping. And it wasn't nothing to, if you had 2 or 3 rocks in your pocket and you stood out on the corner long enough, you gonna sell them. And because I was in my hood, I didn't have a fear of anyone saying, man, you can't be selling over here, because that was my neighborhood. And dudes looked out for me. They knew I was green at the time. So, and my partners have always, all my partners who've been in the game, they've always looked at me like that, like in terms of, that's Lil Silk, we gotta look out for him. And it started like that. I was a little guy back then trying to get into the game, and they looked out for me. So it wasn't a fear because I thought that they were gonna do anything to me, or my only fear was the police and somebody running off with my dope.
When you first hopped into the drug game, did you hop into it with an innocence? Like, was you strap hustling, or was you just out there hustling like innocent? You know what I'm saying? Like, just an innocent hustle, like it.
I probably stood out like a green thumb. I ain't had no gun. Again, I was in my own neighborhood, so I really wasn't. And gunplay was a little different back then. This is right before some of the big wars, gang wars kicked off in the 90s. This was like right before that, or right before it got thick. So yeah, I didn't have no gun, man. I just had, it was just me, my few little rocks, and the little heart I had to stand out there and wait. And eventually though, just like with anything else, once you do it enough, it just becomes second nature, second hand. So I was out there one night green, and as time went on, I just got better and better at it. Not better in terms of great at selling crack, but I became more confident. I just remember rocks being worth $25. And I remember the first time I can't remember who it was. Of course, I'm not mentioning any names, but I remember being around some of my friends, and one of them was selling dope, and I was like, man, that's an easy way to get some money. You know what I'm saying? That's what I'm thinking. You know, I'm getting old. I want to get my own money. Didn't have a job.
And this why you
This still while I'm in high school. You know, it's close to the point of me getting kicked out, but I'm still in high school. I'm there, but I ain't there. I'm clocked out mentally, but I'm still there physically. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think for the most part, I may have got a pack from somebody, but I didn't really know nothing about selling dope. You know, I didn't know how to rock it up. I didn't really know what it looked like, smelled like. All I knew was that dudes who I admired and who I looked up to was doing it. So I felt like I should do it too. And plus, I felt it could be easy money. But yeah, I started doing that before I got kicked out of high school, man. And eventually they did let me go. I wasn't coming anymore. But before I got kicked out, I remember I was racing a friend of mine. We were coming from the skating rink, Saints. Back then, Saints used to be popping.
You was racing in the car?
I was racing in the car. I had used some crack to get a car. Back then, I'm saying back then, you know, I gave some crack to a lady who had actually stole the car from her mama, but I didn't know that. I was just giving her the crack to use the car for that night. End up getting pulled over, got a tampering charge, got 3 years probation. Man, I ain't walked that three. Now this was back in '91. You know when I walked that 3 years probation down? I was 3 years into my prison sentence. So this is like 94, 90, 97. So it took me, what's that, 6 years to walk down the 3 year probation. You know what I'm saying? It was 6 years before I even walked it down, and that's because I got locked up, and we'll get to that point. But my grandmama was just tired of everything I was doing, man. And once I got kicked out of high school, that was it. She said, you got to get up out of St. Louis. You got to get up out the state. So she reached out to some people. Of course, I was the ward of the state, so she reached out to my counselor or whoever those people are who used to come through and check on me. And they set me up to go up to Job Corps in Clearfield, Utah. Caught a plane up there, paid for and everything, got up there. It was sweet. It was different. I didn't know anybody there. I knew a few guys from St. Louis, but it was just a totally different experience. Within a week, I took the GED, aced it, so I had my GED. So at this point, I'm still there. I decided to take a trade. So, I mean, you know, I think the trade I took, I can't recall, maybe it was some sort of clerical trade. But like I said earlier, it really wasn't any different than being in the hood in St. Louis. It was full of youngsters. We was drinking every day. We used to fill up these squeegees with vodka and Kool-Aid and walk around the campus drinking vodka all day and then going to class. You know, and I'm 17, 18 years old. But I started selling weed up there, and I think they called him the dorm advocate. You know, the one person who just like you, but for some reason he get authority to run the dorm. He saw me making out a list or may have saw some weed or something like that, and he told on me, and they basically kicked me out. Did some time in juvenile in Utah because they found out I had a warrant back in St. Louis for that tampering charge. So I had to go to juvenile up there until St. Louis came and got me. In Utah, you're actually a juvenile at the age of 17. In St. Louis, you're an adult at the age of 17. So I went from juvenile in Utah to adult jail in St. Louis when they extradited me back.
How did you go out of town at 17 and find somebody to buy weed? How did that happen?
Man, I think you're gonna flock toward the crowd that you're most curious about. And no matter where you go, no matter what state you're in, no matter what hood you're in, you're always gonna be able to find the guys that think just like you. And at this point, I was smart, but I wasn't necessarily thinking about being, you know, scholastic. You know what I'm saying? It was easy for me, so it was sort of like second nature for me to go up there, pass the test, go to class, make good grades, but I like smoking weed. And I found myself in the crowd that smoked weed. You can just be walking on campus and smell weed and be like, hey man, where y'all get that from? You know what I'm saying? And then find out who got it, and you say, hey, I'm trying to get me a bigger pack so I can do what you're doing, but on my side. And it was just that easy.
Did you ever get heavy into the weed game up there, or you was just hustling like?
Oh yeah, I was just hustling. Yeah, I was never heavy in any drug game my entire life. You know, I played around and sold some drugs, but I never was, copping keys and all of that. You know what I'm saying? I think the most I probably ever comped at one time was probably a couple zips. You know what I'm saying? But, it was just a lifestyle. So I wasn't no big mover, but I was in it.
At this point, Silk's life reflected any typical hood movie that was released during the late 80s and early 90s. But a different type of movie was on the way, one like no other. And this would change not only Silk's neighborhood and Silk's life, it would also do the same for thousands of neighborhoods and families around the United States.
I tell you the moment that I think a lot of guys in my age group remember, and it's the movie Colors. So the movie Colors came out, I believe, in like '88, and at this point, Crips and Bloods wasn't even really in St. Louis for real. We were just claiming sort of our streets. But once Colors came out, and we started to pick up the concept of red and blue Crips and Bloods, it hit St. Louis like a wildfire. Everybody was picking up flags and choosing sides. And it just so happened that the neighborhood, I had an aunt who stayed on the north side, and of course a cousin, and we were inseparable. I still love him to this day like he's my brother. And we were young, so of course those influences between young black men can be real strong, and I think right after Colors came out and we chose sides, it was really, initially it was just about kind of hanging out. But as time goes on, static starts to develop based on whatever may happen in people's neighborhoods. And as a result, guns come out, and it seems like it was overnight. It was an overnight change from me being on the playground to me being in the streets and packing guns and selling dope and all of that. Because I look back on it, and it seems like it was a long time, but it was only a matter of a few years before when I first was introduced and I went off to prison.
So, tell me how you were solidified as a Crip. Like, was you jumped in? Was it just because you already had, it was kind of like Lil Silk on the set, no matter what. He over here enough, he do whatever, we know he loyal.
That's pretty much what it was. It was pretty much that Silk, he, her, you know what I'm saying? My cousin is the one who had influence. And basically because I was his little cousin, I was automatically, given that respect. That's really what and that's like, it's like that with a lot of hoods that you go into. If you know somebody, even, you heard that when you're getting jobs, it's about who you know. And because I was connected to somebody who's already official, that made me official.
In your early years, how dangerous did your gang life get?
It was very dangerous. It was very dangerous. I lived through arguably the most dangerous time in St. Louis history in terms of gang violence, and this was in the mid-90s. The 5th District of St. Louis was dubbed the Bloody Fifth. A lot of murders. There was a huge gang war between where I hung out and another set, and we weren't nothing but maybe 3 or 4 blocks apart. I could remember sitting on the porch and a guy pulling up right in front of us and letting off, and me having to dive in the gangway and basically, just getting missed. So this was every day, daily. It was very dangerous. And, people compare, they always say, well, it's real dangerous today. And I say, man, y'all need to go back and look at the stats. Just look at the stats of like between 92 and 94 of gang violence and how many murders there were just on that side of the city. And then it started to expand. So you got 2 main sets in St. Louis. I ain't talking about Bloods. This is Crip on Crip. So you got the 60s and the 6 Deuce, 2 of the biggest gang groups in St. Louis warring. And then you have offsets taking sides. So you might have College and Carter and Redbud being the main 2 sets with the real issue. But then you have other sets that start to latch on to College and Carter. And then you have other sets that start to latch on to Redbud and Adelaide, and then everybody just picks sides. And it was crazy.
How many homies you think you lost during that war or just over the years, like as far as gangbang?
Early on, I can remember two that really affected me. Two of my real close friends were killed early on, probably at the age of, I would say, 17 and 18. But all together, man, like close, because I lost a lot of people who were gang members, but in terms of guys who I hung out with, that was like from my set back then, I don't know if I can even put a number on it. You know, I don't know if I can put a number on it. From both sides though, because you gotta remember these two sets grew up together and went to school together as kids. So a lot of the guys from that side I knew too. So yeah, it was dangerous and it was scary, but at the same time, you've sort of solidified yourself as this image, and you gotta stand on that at this point, regardless of how you feel. And a lot of people don't realize with adolescents, with teenagers, you have a group of them. The more you have in a group, the more influential those negative thoughts are. So you may have someone who don't really want to do a walk by, who really don't want to carry a gun or do a drive by. Nobody probably want to do it, but because it's a group of y'all and y'all reinforcing that negative thought, you find yourself in situations that you didn't necessarily plan on being in. And by the grace of God, I wasn't never a victim of gang violence in terms of, you know, getting shot or getting killed. I was shot at a lot, but was never shot because of gang violence.
What started that war? What broke y'all? You said y'all grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
What you think started that war? Was it like just somebody getting killed? Was it some he say, she say? Of course, somebody getting killed escalated. Mm-hmm. But what broke up?
Yeah. And I won't go too deep into that, but I will say it was because of someone getting killed. You know, I will say that, and a lot of them start like that, and then you have people that choose sides based on that. And you know, someone getting killed is it could have been based on a misunderstanding. It could have been based on a few things, but I just know after that, it was never the same.
How many years did that war go on?
Well, it went on until I left for prison, for sure, and probably quite a few years after that. And it was so deep, pretty sure there are residuals right now, still, today. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure that many would agree that it's probably not as deep as it was between those sets and those gang sects at that time, but it's still probably shit that done leaked over until today. But it lasted some time, man. And then, of course, I went to jail and went to prison, and the shit is weird because it dies off in prison. You'll find yourself cool with dudes who you straight had beef with on the street, but get to prison and y'all be cool. For some reason, because at this point, you look at it like, well, we ain't on the streets no more. That shit really don't matter. But yeah, but then again, you'll find it in prison too. Dudes still holding on to those same sets with 100 years. They got 100 years to do it. They still holding on to the same set like they still outside, you know?
Sad to say, things kept getting worse for Silk.
So at this point, I done dropped out of school, went to Job Corps, got my GED, got kicked out of Job Corps, came back from Job Corps, went right back to the set, and on top of all that, I was introduced to heroin. I want to say, this is not, I'm not going to use the word introduced because I had experienced it before, but it wasn't until I came back from Job Corps and really sort of let go of any connections I had to being responsible that I developed a habit. So that's what I'll say. I developed a habit probably at the age of 15, 16 years old. And it was weird how it happened, man. I think I used to hang out in this certain area of St. Louis where they sold pills. Instead of crack, it was powder. So it was powder crack and powder heroin. And it was storming real bad one night. And we couldn't leave, you know, we was on the set, we was trying to sell these pills. And because it was storming and we was stuck in the house, we decided let's go ahead and just try some, just to see what it feel like. And I tried it that night and loved it. Straight loved it. I love how it made me feel. Just something about it. I love how it looked. You know, I always thought about Scarface and how he was snorting dope and how that shit was looking cool when you was watching on the movie. So yeah, all of that went into play when I started using heroin. But then it wasn't fun and games no more because I had a habit. And I snorted heroin from then until the day I left and went to prison and actually experienced some of it while I was in my earlier years in prison too.
How was you able to not crash all the way out, like with your hustling and everything, and be on heroin at the same time?
It's crazy because it was, I guess it had to be a level of discipline and how people viewed me, even though I was a gang member. Because in school, I was always viewed sort of like best dressed. Even when I was cripped out with my rags, they was always pressed. You know, I was that dude in terms of.
So you was still on heroin in high school?
Yeah, yeah. I started heroin before I even left high school. I started heroin early. You know, and that's why I think we were talking, and I said when I came back from Job Corps, that's sort of when it got deep. But I experienced heroin before all of that, before I even got kicked out of high school. I was like 15 years old.
How did you avoid not being a dope fiend completely and continue to hustle and hang out and gang bang, you know what I'm saying, take girls on dates? Mm-hmm. How did you not go straight dope fiendish?
Man, you know what? I think for me anyway, and the crew that I hung out with, we looked out for each other in terms of, you know, not just watching each other's back, but I never was a big drug dealer. And the reason I never was a big drug dealer is because I kind of had some family still in my corner that I could depend on if I needed to. And the reason I don't think I crashed out is because I kept that balance in terms of trying to sell weed, trying to sell crack, and then snorting. So I never was able to move up because I was just selling enough, then I smoke some weed, have enough of my habit. So, and then you got an image to protect. You know, back then it was like, you know, dope fiends looked like that, you know, and we were young. You know, I'm 15, 16 years old. I still got a whole lot of life ahead of me. So, you know, I think that's one of the things that you really look at and just be blessed for. Because I got partners who was in the same situation who did crash out, OD, all type of shit. You know what I'm saying? So I think for me, it was you know, a mixture between, you know, maybe not a lot of crash dummy choices and just the grace of God. Because I could have been one of them. I could have been, you know, because I was hooked. You know, I was snorting dope every day. And not just because I wanted to, because I had to. Oh, and I had my dope fiendish times. You know, I had my times when I ain't had no money. I had my times when, you know, I was dumping out the pill that did have heroin in it but didn't have no more, but it was just a little bit left for me to get that fix that I needed so I wouldn't be sick. There was times when, I remember a time when my grandmom, she owned a house on the north side. And she actually did put me out. This was after Job Corps, after all of that, but she let me stay in this house. And I guess we didn't even talk about that because I went to barber school when I got out of gumbo. That's when I went to barber school and got my barber's certificate. Snorting dope all through barber school. I'm talking about every day, dumping pills down the sink. Ended up getting kicked out of barber school. Man, this is all coming back now. I was kicked out of barber school because I was coming there high every day, leaving early, not doing what I was supposed to do, but he did graduate me, so I did end up with a certificate. But anyway, going back, when I was in this house, I used to, after I got my certificate, I was working in a few little barbershops, and I remember leaving the barbershop, and a friend of mine, he sold heroin, you know what I'm saying? He sold boy, and he would take me to the crib. I didn't have a car at the time. So he would pick me up from the barbershop, take me home, and I would always buy a couple pills from him. So this sort of goes back to what you asked me, how I didn't necessarily crash all the way out. I was a barber too. Even though I wasn't barbering every day, I did have a little hustle where I can go to the barber shop and maybe make me a couple $100. And I wasn't paying no rent. I ain't have no car note, you know. So yeah, those sort of things help too. But I used to go in that house, man. He used to drop me off and I used to sit in that chair. And this is a real sort of kind of, it was a lonely time for me because at this point, you're still young. You don't really have a whole lot of direction. So I used to just sit in that house, man, and I would snort my pills and nod off and then wake up the next day and go back to work, you know, if I felt like it. But that was a time in my life where I had a chance to sort of realize what was going on and make a change. But at this point, I was like on that down slope, and it wouldn't be too long before I was all the way caught up and facing all that time in prison.
So you hustling, you cutting hair,
And the hustling was down to a minimum when I was cutting her.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I wasn't hanging out on the corners at this time. That was hella early. At this point, it was kind of like, got some rocks in my pocket, might go down in the pit real quick, sell me a few rocks if I, you know what I'm saying? That sort of thing. But barbering was, you know, I was killing them, barbering, more than I could make selling crack. So, yeah, once I got that barbering under my belt, that took care of any habit I had, you know, any shopping I wanted to do, all of that, you know, and I always made sure when I, you know, as a dope fiend, you know, I always made sure I had money enough to do what I needed to do and keep my fronts up as much as possible.
Eventually, Silk's drug habit would lead him to making some very bad decisions.
For the most part, you know, I keep saying how I was able to keep my fronts up. At some point, those fronts gonna start to get tore down, you know, just because of how things develop. Eventually, you know, I'm like I said, I'm what, 15, 16, 17 years old, I'm still a kid. So eventually those fronts get to, getting tore down and you start to destroy relationships that were once close. And one of the most pivotal things that happened, I was at a barbershop working, family oriented. These people love me. And I'm real close with the wife in this bond to this day. The husband, we still close too, but they split up and she's still in the barber world, so I was able to see her again in that particular world. But I took a gun from a real good friend of mine. And because of that, I wasn't able to work at that barbershop no more. And once I lost that job at that barbershop, you know, I had to fall back on what I knew, which was hustling, which I wasn't necessarily ever good at. So you go to trying to hustle and you're not necessarily good at, and you need money to feed that habit. You have to find something else that you're gonna do to help feed that habit. So that's when I picked up the gun and started to do robberies. Of course, I don't want to say too much in terms of mine, because I don't necessarily remember the first robbery, but I will say, you ever seen that movie Dick and Jane with, what's the white actor's name?
Yeah, Jim Carrey.
Jim Carrey. And the first few robberies that they did, it was sort of like that, straight joke. Let's just say the first couple people that were potential robbery victims were people that I knew and didn't necessarily find out that they were almost robbery victims. They were almost robbery victims, but because I knew them, they didn't become victims. And it could have easily been, you know, a victim, but I was like, how do you walk up on your first two robberies and you know both of them? And I guess this just says a lot about, you know, me being known or being around, going out all the time. So, but long story short, I started to do those a lot. And that was the way I was able to feed my heroin addiction. Any other addiction I had at this point in my life, when I was robbing, I was snorting heroin, I was snorting cocaine, I was smoking weed, I was smoking primos, which is weed with crack in it, not powder, but crack. So it was everything under the sun at this point. And it got so bad. This is how bad it got. Remember the 3 years probation that I got for the tampering? Maybe, I think this was 2, maybe 3 years prior to that. I was still on the run for that. Obviously, doing this lifestyle I'm telling you about in terms of snorting dope and all that, I ain't going to see no PO. I'm running. I got so sick of myself. My last night free, prior to my big sentence, I had heroin on me. I was actually selling her. This is crazy because I keep talking about what I was using. Somehow I was able to keep enough drugs to sell. But I had heroin, powder cocaine, and crack cocaine, and weed on me. Now I know I was getting ready to turn myself in. So I went, a friend of mine's house. We rolled up all that shit and snorted all that shit. And I went right around the corner to my grandmother's house because I was out in the county, and knocked on the door. She had been looking for me. Everybody had been looking for me. I hadn't been at home. I had been, living in the dope houses with my partners and hanging out all night. I said, I'm ready to turn myself in. My mom, I'm just remembering this, my mom was actually at home at this point and at my grandmother's house when I showed up at the door. And she called out, my mom's name is Sherry. And she was like, Sherry, let's go before he changed his mind. And I remember them putting me in a car and taking me out to the police station, and I turned myself in. And I wasn't in there long. I think I did a few months and had my probation reinstated. Got out, and I was out, I want to say 4 months before I was sent to prison for 30 years.
With no money and needing to feed his drug addiction, Silk found himself in a very desperate situation. And the only way he thought he could get out of that situation was by the gun.
Actually, I had slowed down with snorting heroin. I was hanging out with a friend of mine, real good friend of mine, and he told me, man, he didn't fuck with heroin, he just smoked weed. And he was like, man, if you gonna fuck with me, you can't be snorting that shit while we out here hustling. He was a straight hustler and a weed smoker. And I was like, bet. So I didn't snort dope all day, but what I would do was hustle all day. Now this one, I was actually hustling pretty good at this point. And I would hustle all day, and then at the end of the day, I would go get me a couple pills, snort them, chill, wake up the next day, do the same thing. At this time, my mom was home, my grandmother and my stepmother, they were all looking for me. I had been out in the streets. I had been gone maybe a couple weeks. No one had, they know where I'm at. They knew I wasn't missing or anything, but I just, I wasn't staying at a family member's house or nothing like that. But this night, I remember, and this is an example of when God decides to speak to you. Obvious. My grandmother showed up down on the set, College and Quarter, in her car. Boy, how long you been down here? You need to come home. We've been looking for you. We're sick about you. I was like, okay, Grandma, I'm gonna come home tonight. An hour later, my mother, my biological mother, pulls up. Same thing. Now we got a sort of a different relationship, so I talk to her a little bit different because she knows. So I'm like, Mama, you know what I'm down here doing. And she's like, well, you need to hurry up and get home because your grandmother worried about you and I'm missing you and all that. I was like, okay, I'll be home tonight. Another hour goes past. My stepmom pulls up. Now this is 3 people, 3 influential ladies in my life. And I'm pretty sure, I can't recall the story, but it's something about a guy was drowning and God sent him a boat, sent him something else, and then sent him something else. And the guy kept saying, well, when you gonna help me? He's like, well, I sent you 3 things to save yourself. And he never took all of them, and he eventually drowned. So that's what happened to me. I didn't listen to neither one of them. My mom, my stepmom, or my grandmama. I didn't listen to none of them. And that night, I remember I had a pocket full of money, and I used to let this little chick hold my money for me when I was hustling, because of course the police come, they take your money. And of course I left my dope probably on the side of a house in a can or some shit like that. And I let her hold my money, and jumped in my car, and I was going to, I can't remember exactly what I was going to do, but I remember wanting to go get me a couple pills. But I was like, damn, my money on the set with an old girl. She was gone. I went back to the set, she was gone, so I don't have no cash, but I got a gun. Mind you, she probably had maybe about $3,000 of mine or something like that. So I wasn't broke. Pulled over at the gas station lot, and I'm like, man, I need to get me a couple pills before I jump on this highway. I think I was going to comp or some shit like that. And I need to give me a couple pills. And saw the guy on the payphone. This is all unplanned. Never thought that I would be in this situation at this particular point. Basically, man, I walked over to the guy and upped the pistol and told him to give me what he had. He raised both his hands. He was on a payphone, so when he raised his hands, he had a beer in one hand and he had the payphone in the other hand. So he put the payphone down, and he asked me, he's like, what you want? I was like, put your beer down and let me get that. You know what it is. And so while he was reaching down to put his beer down, he was also reaching behind his back, which I didn't see because I'm watching the hand with the beer in it. So I'm watching this hand, and I'm watching the hand that's high. When he put the beer down, by the time he stood back up straight, he had a 9mm in his hand and shot me once in the chest. This is point blank. We like close enough to touch each other. His gun was probably an inch from my chest. So he shot me point blank range in the chest, went straight through my chest, out my back. I had a 357 at night. Basically just let it go. Hit him twice, I believe, in the left forearm and the abdomen, I think, in his stomach, and took off running. Remember, I'm shot in the chest, and I know I'm shot in the chest. So all of this is going through my head. I don't know if I'm in the heart or anything, but I know it's on the same side, and I know it, this ain't no game. So while I'm running, he let off one shot. I let off two initially, and then he let off the other 15. And he hit me 2 more times. He hit me in my right thigh, and then he hit me in my left shin, which kicked my leg up. And when my leg came down, it actually crushed. So it was like hitting you in the leg, the bullet's momentum kicked my leg up, and when it came down, it just crushed like a car window. And so, of course, when it crushed, I fell to that side. And that was it. He shot at me 15 times, hit me 3 times. I shot at him 6, hit him twice. And it all happened in a matter of 30 seconds. Now, at this point, I know I'm hitting the chest, I'm hitting both legs. In the part of St. Louis that this is at Grand and 70. It used to be a Sinclair gas station lot. Right now, I believe it's like a tire shop or something like that. And I think that incident shut it down. But it's extremely dark down there. The only thing you can hear are cars going by on the highway. So I laid there, man, and initially I was up. And I was in shock. I wasn't in pain. To be honest, it was probably the most peaceful I had felt in a long time. And it's weird because this is like not nicked or shot in the toe. This is a life-threatening, bullet wound. And I understand that, but it was peaceful. And I remember, I think playing in the plasma. I remember playing with the blood plasma. I remember my leg that was broke was mangled and twisted and in my lap, but I was still at peace. And when they say that your life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die, that is absolutely true. I remember seeing myself in kindergarten. I remember hearing my grandmom, say some stuff to me, some things that she may have said when I was a kid. I remember that. And the weirdest thing is, Murder Was the Case That They Gave Me played in my head. That Snoop Dogg song, I'm hearing every word. And it was all applying to me, which is crazy. But I ended up passing out a couple times. And each time that I woke up, I was still in peace. I still wasn't in pain. But the last time I woke up, when I say every police officer in the city of St. Louis was on scene, I'm probably underestimating. There were police everywhere. Sirens, ambulance, people talking, me getting kicked, me asking, who shot this person, me getting turned over on my chest, which I was shot in, knees in my back. And I remember them asking me, I still don't know who this person is. Who shot the man on the payphone. And my response was, under all this duress, I knew not to tell on myself. I said, I don't know who the hell shot him. I was asking somebody for change for $1 and I got shot. And my gun laying right there, but still, as a criminal, you understand that the last person you want to tell on is yourself. So I never told on myself. And I never found out who this person was until I got to the hospital later on that evening.
And the person that Silk shot was the worst type of person that any criminal would want to find themselves committing a crime against. Yes, you guessed it, a police officer.
I thought I was gonna die. The pain that I didn't feel initially, I started to feel immensely after that. When I woke up that last time and the police officer and everything around, I'm in extreme pain. Now at this point, I'm trying to fight. And I remember the ambulance lady talking to the police, and she said, because they handcuffed me, and she was like, she told them to take the handcuffs off because they wasn't supposed to because of the way I was shot or something, and she was upset. And because of seeing the fear in her eyes and the anger in her eyes, of course, that sort of translated to me, so now I'm scared out of my mind. They get me in the ambulance, and I remember asking her, was I gonna die? Now, she said no, but her face told like a whole different story. You know what I'm saying? It was like she didn't know. Passed out again. My next memory was like you would see in the movie, being rushed down a hospital corridor with the lights flashing. Passed out again, and the last time I woke up, I had been in surgery, I think, for 4 hours. I had a collapsed lung. I had a chest tube, which they actually gave me while I was still conscious. They had to cut and add a tube into my lung because it was filling up with blood, and I had started to spit up blood. I had a big bar on my leg to hold my leg together, and that was a hell of a thing, man. Because even though I'm shot and I'm in pain, I done committed a horrendous crime. Found out that the guy that I shot was actually a police officer. And when I heard that, I'm thinking like, well, no, let me back up. Actually, I knew that before, but I'm thinking when they said who shot the cop, I'm thinking because of the shootout that I had accidentally just shot wild somewhere and hit a police officer. I still wasn't thinking that the guy I robbed was a police officer because he had on a baseball jersey, was drinking a beer, his car right there, music loud. He didn't look like a cop, but he was a rookie. He was young. He wasn't number 21, and I was 19, so we were, close in age. But when I got to the hospital, I'm so out of it, you would think that I would be worried about this case, what I did. None of that. You know what I was worried about? I was worried about, was I gonna miss Looney Tunes or not? It's crazy. I mean, actually got out of surgery, my second surgery, and cussed every nurse out in there because when they turned my TV on, Looney Tunes was going off. And I say that to say that there had to have been some level of extreme disconnect mentally between what I had done and where I was, because I wasn't even tripping off of it. You know, it hadn't even registered yet until maybe a day later when I was arraigned in court.
With me being in complete awe of this situation, I continue to ask Silk more questions to get more intricate details of this event. Two things. One, how did you not die with a whole, what kind, he shot you with a 9 and it went through your right side?
Right here.
Right through there. It went through there. Now, did they explain to you how you not died or how close you came to death?
Yeah.
That bullet?
Yeah, that
So
bullet.
talk about that.
Okay, yeah, so I was lucky, I'm lucky to be alive based on the injuries that I sustained, particularly the one in my chest. It missed my heart by a quarter of an inch. It did go through my lung, and I remember the doctor saying one of the reasons why I survived is because he was so close, and the bullet didn't have time to expand, and because I'm so thin. So he was saying my weight and the closeness is what really saved me. Because if you were to see the bullet hole here and you would look at the bullet hole here, they're two different sizes. The bullet hole on my leg is probably like that. Entry wound, it's about like that. And the entry wound on my chest, very small in the front, but it comes out, of course, a bit bigger. But because we were so close, I think that's what saved me.
Now, what saved, where you hit him again? You hit him in the chest twice?
No, I hit him in the, I'm glad I didn't. In the left forearm, probably from this angle, you know, because he tried to up here, and then in the stomach with a 357, which is a big gun.
So that gut shot could have potentially killed him, though.
Almost did. It dropped him, and I didn't drop. Mine went through like that. You know, it was more so like, dang, what the? It was that fast and loud. But although my shirt was burnt because of the, because my shirt was burnt because of the muzzle flash. We were so close. You know what I'm saying? We were so close that the muzzle flash almost burnt my face. But yeah, like I said, because of us being close, I think that's what saved me.
So his shit went through his stomach.
It went through him and dropped him. The first shot was in his arm. The second shot dropped him. And that's what gave me time enough to sort of turn and try to run. But he was able to pick his gun back up and he unloaded. He said he had 16 shots. And I was that, how do they describe those police issued weapon? Service issue, something like that. It had 16 shots. And in the paperwork he was saying he had, because they asked him how did he know how many times he had shot. And he said because he knew that he had 16 full live rounds in his gun, and when he was done, the gun was cocked back and empty. So he shot 16 times at me at a range of under 20 to 30 feet, meaning we were still extremely close. And of course, he's shot too, and he was able to hit me in both legs, and my legs are the only thing moving. So I always felt that if he really wanted to, he could have shot me in the back. He could have shot me in the head. All of those areas were more stable than two moving legs. So something else that it's a weird way thankful for. You know, he was able to shoot me in both legs. He had to be a real good shot. And I'm running, so yeah.
So did he shoot you from, like, if he fell, he got back up?
He got back up. Yeah, he fell back into the phone booth or into the bushes or whatever. And I'm not running out like Carl Lewis because I'm shot. You know, I'm injured and it's in the lung, so this lung collapses fast. So I'm running, but I may have gotten 5 or 6 feet before he picked up his gun and started to fire again. And I forgot to mention this, the person he was on the phone with was a police officer. So she heard everything. And he knew that when I asked him to put the phone down, instead of hanging it up, he put the phone in the cradle. And I think she was a dispatcher or something like that. So she heard everything that went on, gunshots and everything. And I can only imagine what she was going through. Can you imagine that? You're on the phone with somebody you love, and then all of a sudden, you think you hear somebody announce a robbery, and then 5 seconds later, you hear he got, he had 16, and I had 6. How many is that? 22 shots, something like that. So could you imagine that? She heard 22 shots that close to her and probably didn't know what the hell was going on.
When he went down, when you thought he was putting down the beer, when he came all the way back up completely to the top, then shot you, or he shot you from an angle?
He came all the way back up.
So what was you doing when he was coming all the way back up?
Watching. First of all, that's the last thing you expecting in all the world is that tonight you getting ready to get murdered.
But
So, yeah.
He came up fast or he came up slow like?
No, he came, let me show you. If I stand up, you ain't gonna be able to see me.
Yeah,
But he this is basically what he did. He was like this. He say, so what you want me to do? I said, put the bird down. He put the phone down and he did just like this. Just like this.
Okay.
Yeah, so he like this. He like
kinda like misdirection.
exactly, because he got his hand on it when he bending over. But I'm like this. I'm like, put the bird down. I ain't looking at this hand. That's her.
So the hand he grabbed the gun with was the hand he grabbed the gun with was the same hand that the phone was in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's how
yeah.
he got you.
Yeah, exactly. Because he had the beer in the other hand. And I'm trying to think he had the
So he had to be coming across you with the beer hand. Like he had to be like in your face straight.
just say you facing me.
Exactly.
Just say you
Like
facing
this.
me.
He like this.
Yeah, he doing like this. He putting it down with this hand and he reaching with his right.
And you looking at this hand.
And I'm looking down like this. So the other hand is over here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'm looking like this, and by the time he stand up, and then, you know, I'm not really prepared to looking to shoot nobody.
Right.
So I ain't in the mindset to shoot, even though I will, but I'm not really expecting this to be no full blown out gunfight with two people standing less than a foot apart. I'm not expecting that at all. Now in his mind, his life is on the line. Plus he a cop, plus he's trained. He ain't getting ready to let this threat just, you know what I'm saying? So our mind states are totally different. He ready for war, I'm not at this point. Now I had to get ready real quick, but at that point, it's over. You know, I'm not getting too far with a lung shot, and that's just how it was. It's crazy.
I was curious to know if Silk thought that heroin was the reason for his lack of remorse over this situation.
I think early on, yes. And later on, probably a mixture between the traumatic experience of, you know, facing death. You know, I got to a point when I was laying on that lot where I had literally accepted. This is huge when you think about that. I had literally accepted the fact that I'm going to die tonight. That's when I was saying I was at peace, because I wasn't fighting. I was just there. And I had accepted the fact that, wow, I'm getting ready to die right now on this lot. And that's what I was thinking. So now later on, of course, when you're in the hospital and you start to come to, you know, it's different. But that disconnect had to be huge. Of course, the heroin played a huge role in me not necessarily being empathetic, generally speaking, when it came to me pulling the gun, because you have to make a person a thing in order to pull a gun out on them and rob them. You have to erase all of that empathy, all of that anyway. So the heroin sort of probably made it easier for me to do that to someone. But at the same time, the traumatic experience of actually accepting the fact that I was getting ready to die and I didn't, probably, you know, on your mind, I probably can't even explain the effect that it probably had on me at that time. I was probably close to being crazy, you know, or delirious or insane is probably a better term at that point, because there's so much going through and your body actually will disassociate itself from you in order to survive. You know, a body will shut off some of your thoughts that they think will hinder you from surviving just to survive. So, you know, it's so many ways to look at it, but I'm sure heroin played a huge role.
At what point did you start to normalize and be like, oh my God, I'm in some shit? Was it when you went to court? Was it like the next day? Like at what point were you was like, or was you like, this shit's finna get ugly.
It's weird, man, because once you get caught and you go to jail, you really don't have a lot of, you can do that in your head, but you don't have a lot of time to do it outwardly because now you in the jungle. You know, you don't have time to, oh man, dudes do it. Get in jail, be crying and, all type of shit. And I'm not gonna say I didn't cry because of course I would in my cell. I would cry and be like, God damn, how the fuck I do, get myself into this.
After being transferred from the hospital to a state facility, it didn't take long for Silk to have his day in court.
Didn't have a whole lot of court appearances. Those court appearances when you don't make, but first of all, I had a bond that I couldn't make. I think I had $1 million bond, something like that. And I got.
How long was you in the hospital before you got to court, your first arraignment?
And I'm just gonna guess on the amount of time I was in the hospital. I was reading that paperwork I was telling you about today, and he said he was in the hospital for 9 days. So I would approximate that I was in there for maybe a week, maybe a couple days more than a week. But they sent me right to the workhouse. I probably, as a matter of fact, I wasn't in there that long. He was in there longer than I was. I don't think I was in the hospital number like 3 or 4 days. Because when I got to the workhouse, I still had wounds leaking, sick, gangrene. Mind you, I just out of cop, so a lot of people hate me. You had the streets that look at you and be like, oh man, he just shot a cop and all that. But a lot of the responsible people, they like, they want to kick you. They don't like you. So I wasn't treated well. I wasn't expecting to be treated well, but yeah, when I got to the workhouse, it was sort of like I went to the arraignment and then that was it. I didn't see anybody else for quite some time. Now I had a lawyer at the point who came down to the workhouse and he would talk to me about, what happened and saying, talking about the deposition that he was going to have with the officer and how that went or whatever. And I went through a couple lawyers, and the one thing that sticks out were because I'm caught at the scene with the gun. We ain't really thinking about trial. They're trying to approach this in a way where I can snatch as least amount of time as possible, get a plea deal. And I think my first offer was 2 50-year sentences, and then it was life. It was life, and then something like 2 50s and some big numbers. And long story short, 30 was the last number that was offered. The 85% law had passed 8 days after my crime, so I wouldn't be under that law, which means if I got 30 years, I wouldn't have to serve, before being eligible for parole, I wouldn't have to serve number 10 before I'm eligible. 85% law meaning you're gonna serve 85% of that 30 before you're eligible. So I was lucky in that regard. But I did take the 30, and I took it because I knew I would be fairly young, and still have some life left when I got out, if I got out as soon as I possibly could. And I knew based on the type of crime I had, I wasn't gonna get out in 10 years. I could have shot some average nigga on the street and probably would have did 5 or 6 years. But because it was a police officer, of course, they're gonna push you to the max and get as much time out of you as possible. The judge told me in so many words that you'll still be young. When you come home, you have a chance to change your life. Good luck. And that was it. At that point, I would say, look, I'm done with banging. I'm done with hanging out with dumbass dudes who ain't got nothing better to do but ruin their lives. That was my mindset. Now, I did go to prison. I still was hanging out with all my partners early on, smoking weed, all that shit. But I think the most important thing is I had decided to do something different early on. And I knew it would be more beneficial to me once I got home. So I didn't go in thinking that I'm just gonna do these years and do some time. I went in preparing for the day that I would be released.
Today, Silk has done one of the biggest 360s possibly in the history of ex-convicts. A transformation that is truly worthy of praise. More proof that some of these long-term sentences aren't necessary for some people to completely change.
So I went to prison in August 20th, 1994. I got out August 19th, 2011. That's 17 years flat. While I was in prison, 95% of my prison time was me changing my life. I had 3 jobs the entire time I was in prison. I ran the library for 5 years. I worked at a company, actually, who used inmates' labor and paid us real good, called the Center for Braille and Narration Production, where we would transcribe collegiate level and children level books into Braille for blind kids. And they paid us real good for that. I worked there for 5 years. And then for my, not last 5, but this other 5 would be 15 total, because I did 2 in the workhouse and 15 in prison. My last 5, I worked for restorative justice and taught victims' right classes for restorative justice. Made blankets and stuff to give to homeless people, grew vegetables and fruit to give to homeless people, taught classes to guys who were in the hole and to guys who signed up for the class. And I also went through a program called ITC, which was the Intensive Therapeutic Community. All of those laid the foundation for me, the person that I would be once I was released in 2011. Since I've been home, man, it's been good. You know, I haven't made a lot of money, but I've been positive. When I first came home, I was washing dishes just like you would think for your typical guy getting out of prison, don't have a lot of connections. I got out on a Friday. I actually was in Forest Park College that Monday because I had, they set you up before you get out of prison. You can actually enroll in college, a whole lot of other stuff. So I was actually in college with a 4.0 average when I first came home. I went back to the barbering thing, tried to start cutting hair, wasn't really feeling it the way I was before I left. So I decided to just get a regular job. So I worked a few different jobs, staying out of bullshit, not hanging with the wrong crowd. None of that is anything that I would be doing anyway. And luckily I haven't had a whole lot of influences that would try to pull me back, because I've sort of kept myself out of those circles. I also run my own company, Next Level Fashion Company, probably gonna change the name. But basically I'm a customized apparel company where we make t-shirts, jogging pants, caps, masks, you name it, we can do it. And that's my own company, and I've been running that since 2016. So it's been a few years, and that's ongoing. I wrote a book. I'm a poet. I forgot to mention that. And I write. I'm a writer. Check out my book. It's called Poetic Justice, Writing for My Life. It's on Amazon, so if you do type that in, Poetic Justice, Writing for My Life, you'll see it, by Silk Spann. It's a small collection of poetry during the elementary phase of my prison sentence, so these poems reflect my early days in prison. Everything that I was going through, whether they were actual experiences, emotions, feelings, all of that. Some real good work, so be sure to check it out. The cherry on all of this is that God has blessed me to marry my childhood sweetheart, which is crazy. This is like my best friend, has always been my best friend. Not to mention she's beautiful. But yeah, we were married in 2018, the love of my life, and I couldn't be happier.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and share. And on that note, I'm going to leave you with some words of wisdom from St. Louis Silk.
I approach it real different, man. I'm not the type of person to say, hey man, don't get out there and gang bang, because I know that kids are gonna, at a certain age, particularly with little boys, they're gonna make decisions. But what I want you to understand is if you decide to gang bang, sell drugs, pack pistols, all that bullshit, you gotta understand that they got some place to put you. There's a lot of consequences come with that shit, and it ain't no joke. So if you wanna put yourself in a position and to whether it's selling drugs or any of that shit that you know gonna send you to prison, just don't cry when they come with all that time. But I would suggest you just stay in school. Get the best education you can. You already got so many strikes against you, so get the best education you can. Stay away from those bad influences, man, and live your life, because they will take it from you. I looked at my life as if it was 4 parts. I spent the first part 19 years free. Fucked up a lot of that. The second part was 17 years, locked up. This is the third sort of portion of my life. And I'm only looking as if I got 4. you don't have another one after this. At that point, it's over. You know, I'm not getting too far with a lung shot, and that's just how it was. It was crazy, man. It's crazy.